The Third Reich deployed an extraordinary array of anti-aircraft weapons during World War II, from rapid-firing 20mm cannons that could shred low-flying aircraft to massive 128mm guns whose thunderous reports echoed across entire cities. This video examines every significant anti-aircraft gun fielded by German forces across 6 years of devastating aerial warfare. These weapons formed the backbone of the Reich's air defense, responsible for at least half of all American bomber losses over Germany, and forcing countless bombers to release their payloads from altitudes where accuracy became impossible. Let us begin with light anti-aircraft guns, the rapid-firing weapons designed to engage aircraft at low altitudes. The 2-centimeter Flak 30 was the standard German light anti-aircraft gun when the war began and represented a significant advancement in automatic anti-aircraft weaponry. Development traced back to the early 1930s when Rheinmetall adapted the Swiss Solothurn ST-5 design for German military requirements. The weapon entered service with the Kriegsmarine in 1934 and with the Luftwaffe in 1935, quickly becoming a fixture of German air defense. Weighing approximately 450 kilograms in firing position, this automatic cannon fired 20mm shells at a cyclic rate of 280 rounds per minute, though practical rates averaged around 120 rounds per minute due to the 20-round box magazine, requiring frequent changes. The gun could engage targets at effective ranges up to 2,200 meters and reach aircraft flying at altitudes up to 3,700 meters. A crew of 7 men operated the weapon, with loaders constantly working to keep magazines ready as the gunner tracked incoming aircraft. The Flak 30 served across every front where German forces fought, from the frozen wastes of Norway to the scorching deserts of North Africa. Both Mauser and Rheinmetall Borsig manufactured the weapon, with production continuing even after improved variants entered service. The Kriegsmarine adopted a naval variant designated C-30 for shipboard use, where it provided close-in defense against attacking aircraft. Germany produced approximately 48,000 20mm Flak 30 and 38 series guns during the war, making this family of weapons among the most numerous German artillery pieces of the entire conflict. Lithuania purchased 150 Flak 30 units in 1939, while Finland acquired 50 examples that same year, designating them 20 ITK-30 BSW. These export sales demonstrated the weapon's international reputation even before the war began. The 2-centimeter Flak 38 entered service in 1940 as an improved version, addressing the limitations of its predecessor. While the earlier Flak 30 had proven effective, the Luftwaffe and Heer both expressed concerns about its rate of fire given the ever-increasing speeds of Allied fighter bombers and attack aircraft. Rheinmetall responded by developing a refined mechanism that nearly doubled the cyclic rate to 480 rounds per minute, with practical rates reaching approximately 180 to 220 rounds per minute. The improved weapon weighed slightly less than its predecessor, at approximately 420 kilograms in firing position. Despite using the same 20-round magazines, the faster firing rate meant crews had to work even harder to keep the weapon fed during engagements. The Flak 38 became the standard German Army anti-aircraft gun by 1939 and saw production continue until the war's end. A specialized mountain variant designated the Gebirgsflak 38 was developed by Mauser for use by paratroopers and mountain troops. This lighter version could be broken down into several loads for transport over difficult terrain and featured a special tripod mount for firing from uneven ground. The mountain variant entered service in 1942 and proved invaluable during operations in Norway, Italy, and the Balkans where conventional wheeled weapons could not follow. The 2-centimeter Flak-Vierling 38 represented an innovative solution to the single-barrel weapon's limitations against increasingly fast and durable aircraft. Introduced in 1940, this configuration mounted 4 Flak 38 cannons onto a single carriage, creating a devastating close-range air defense platform. The weapon consisted of quad-mounted guns with collapsing seats for the crew, folding handles for traverse and elevation, and ammunition racks positioned for rapid reloading. A triangular base with leveling jacks at each leg provided stability during firing. When raised to firing position, the entire assembly stood just over 3 meters tall. Each of the four guns retained its separate 20-round magazine, meaning the combined theoretical rate of fire reached 1,400 rounds per minute. In practice, the need to replace emptied magazines every 6 seconds on each barrel reduced the sustainable rate to approximately 800 rounds per minute. The Flak Vierling created an almost impenetrable wall of explosive shells against low-flying aircraft, and Allied ground attack pilots learned to respect these weapons that could shred an aircraft in seconds. The weapon proved equally devastating against ground targets including infantry, light vehicles, and even lightly armored reconnaissance vehicles. The Flak Vierling became a common fixture protecting critical installations across occupied Europe and the Reich itself. Pairs of these weapons defended Hitler's personal command train, mounted on flatbed cars disguised to look like ordinary boxcars until the covers were thrown back and the guns opened fire. Production reached approximately 3,800 units between 1940 and 1945. Romania ordered 300 Flak 38 guns in September 1940, with deliveries beginning in May 1941. The Japanese developed their own version, designated the Type II 20mm anti-aircraft machine cannon based on the German Flak 38 design, demonstrating the weapon's influence on anti-aircraft development worldwide. Finland acquired 113 Flak 38 guns during the Continuation War, designating them 20 ITK-38 BSW. These weapons provided critical air defense for Finnish forces facing Soviet aerial attacks. Next on the list is medium anti-aircraft artillery, the guns designed to engage aircraft at intermediate altitudes. The 3.7cm Flak 18 was the original German 37mm anti-aircraft gun, developed by Rheinmetall in 1935. This fully automatic cannon represented a significant step up from the 20mm weapons in terms of both range and hitting power. The weapon fired 37mm shells weighing approximately 650 grams at a muzzle velocity of nearly 800 meters per second, compared to the 40mm Bofors, which fired a slightly heavier 900-gram shell at approximately 880 meters per second. Effective engagement altitude reached approximately 4,200 meters, substantially extending the defensive envelope beyond what the lighter 20mm weapons could achieve. A single 37mm hit usually sufficed to destroy or cripple most aircraft, whereas the smaller 20mm rounds often required multiple impacts to achieve kills. The gun featured a monoblock tube and automatic action operated by barrel recoil and residual gas pressure, with a combination muzzle brake and flash eliminator fitted to the barrel. The cruciform mount included 2 bogies and screw-type leveling jacks for rapid emplacement. The Flak 18 was produced in limited numbers before production shifted to improved variants, with manufacturing ending by 1936 as development continued toward more refined designs. The 3.7cm Flak 36 and 37 represented the primary medium anti-aircraft weapons of the German armed forces throughout the war. Development focused on replacing the cumbersome dual-axle mount of the Flak 18 with a lighter single-axle carriage. The resulting Flak 36 reduced combat weight to 1,550 kilograms, while transport weight dropped to 2,400 kilograms. Ballistic characteristics remained unchanged from the earlier model, but practical rate of fire increased to 120 rounds per minute, with a theoretical maximum of 180 rounds per minute. The following year, introduction of a new simplified sighting system produced the otherwise identical Flak 37. These variants became the most produced of the 37mm series, serving in both towed and self-propelled configurations. In 1938, the Kingdom of Romania acquired a license to locally produce 360 guns at the Astra Works in Brasov, demonstrating the design's export appeal. The weapon proved effective against medium bombers and ground attack aircraft, forcing them to operate from higher altitudes where bombing accuracy suffered significantly. Finnish forces designated the Flak 37 as the 37 ITK-37 and employed it effectively during the Continuation War against Soviet aircraft. The 3.7cm Flak 43 was a dramatic improvement over the older models, representing an entirely new approach to medium anti-aircraft gun design. Introduced in 1943, This weapon featured a revolutionary gas-operated breech mechanism that increased practical firing rate to 150 to 180 rounds per minute, while simultaneously reducing weight to 1,250 kilograms in combat configuration. The new design proved both lighter and more compact than its closest Allied counterpart, the 40mm Bofors, while achieving approximately twice the rate of fire. A twin-mounted version designated the Flak's Willing 43 doubled the available firepower for critical installations. Large-scale production did not commence until 1944, with approximately 7,200 weapons produced by the war's end, counting each barrel of the twin mounts separately. The Kriegsmarine developed a marine variant designated the 3.7cm Flak 43M43U for installation on Type 7 and Type 9 U-boats mounted on the LM-42U platform. The earlier Flak 18 was also adapted for aviation use as the BK 3.7, the lightest caliber model of the Bordkanone series of heavy aircraft cannon. This configuration saw successful employment on the Junkers 87G tank destroyer variant, flown with considerable success by Hans Ulrich Rudel, as well as the Junkers 88 P2 and P3 subtypes, and the Henschel 129 ground attack aircraft. Let us move on to heavy anti-aircraft artillery, the guns that formed the primary defense against high-altitude bombing attacks. The 8.8cm Flak 18, 36, and 37 series is arguably the most famous artillery piece of World War II, and certainly one of the most versatile weapons ever fielded by any nation. Originally conceived as an anti-aircraft gun during the 1920s, development was conducted secretly in Sweden by Krupp engineers cooperating with Bofors to circumvent Treaty of Versailles restrictions on German weapons development. Krupp had held majority ownership of Bofors since 1921, facilitating this clandestine cooperation. After rejecting 75mm designs as insufficiently powerful, the development team settled on 88mm, a caliber long favored by the Imperial German Navy. The prototype Flak 18 appeared in 1928 following years of clandestine development. By September 1932, Krupp had delivered 2 guns and 10 trailers for evaluation. Testing proved successful, and with minor modifications the design was adopted for service in 1933 under the deliberately misleading designation, suggesting an older weapon to avoid arousing Allied suspicions. The Flak 18 featured a single piece barrel mounted on a cruciform gun carriage that allowed fire in any direction. A semi-automatic loading system ejected fired shells automatically, allowing crews to reload by simply inserting a new round into the loading tray. This mechanism achieved firing rates of 15 to 20 rounds per minute, superior to similar weapons of the era. The gun could elevate to 85 degrees for anti-aircraft fire, while still depressing to -3 degrees for engaging ground targets. Widespread production commenced after the Nazi rise to power, and the Flak 18 was available in limited numbers when Germany intervened in the Spanish Civil War beginning in 1936. Combat experience with the Condor Legion proved the weapon accurate and versatile, establishing the foundation for its legendary reputation. The Flak 36 appeared next, distinguished primarily by its 3-piece barrel assembly designed for easier replacement of worn sections. The earlier single-piece barrel required complete replacement when the chamber wore from repeated firing. The new section design allowed crews to replace only the worn portion, significantly reducing maintenance costs and time. The trailer was also improved for quicker setup, and the new Sonderanhänger 202 bogies enabled faster transition from transport to firing position. Critically, guns mounted on these improved trailers could engage ground targets while still on their traveling wheels, a capability that would prove decisive in North Africa. The Flak 37 followed with updated instrumentation, allowing gun layers to more easily follow directions from battery fire directors via the Übertragungsser 37 data transmission system. By the outbreak of war in September 1939, the German military possessed approximately 2,600 heavy flak guns ready for action, the majority being 88s. The weapon first demonstrated its anti-tank potential during the campaign in France in May 1940. At Arras on May 21st, British Matilda tanks smashed into the German 7th Panzer Division, causing panic until 88s were brought forward. Rommel personally directed the guns as they penetrated the Matilda's 78mm of frontal armor that had stopped every other German weapon. In North Africa, the 88 established its reputation as the ultimate tank killer. At Halfaya Pass during Operation Battle Axe in June 1941, 5 well-concealed 88s commanded by Captain Wilhelm Bach, a former Lutheran pastor nicknamed Papa Willi by his men, decimated attacking British tanks. 11 Matildas were destroyed by the dug-in Flak guns during this engagement. Across the entire 3-day battle, German positions equipped with 13 88s at Halfaya Pass, Hafid Ridge, and supporting the 8th Panzer Regiment destroyed scores of British tanks, contributing to total British losses exceeding 90 tanks. The pass earned the grim nickname Hellfire Pass among Allied soldiers. During the North African campaign, Rommel made devastatingly effective use of the 88, often luring British tanks into carefully prepared traps by baiting them with apparently retreating German panzers. A mere 2 Flak battalions destroyed 264 British tanks in 1941 alone. Later at the Battle of Faid in Tunisia, Rommel camouflaged many 88s in vegetation-filled areas alongside 75mm PaK-40 and 50mm PaK-38 anti-tank guns. Inexperienced American tankers and commanders rushed into the valley only to be obliterated by concealed guns engaging them at ranges far beyond those of their own 75mm weapons. On July 18 and 19, 1944, a Luftwaffe 88mm anti-aircraft battery was employed by Major Hans von Luck to attack British tanks near Cagny during Operation Goodwood. Approximately 20 tanks were destroyed in the opening minutes of engagement, with the battery contributing significantly to the heavy British armour losses during that action, though the exact number destroyed by the Flak guns versus other German units in the sector remains debated by historians. As an anti-aircraft weapon, the 88 could engage targets at effective ranges exceeding 26,000 feet with a maximum ceiling approaching 32,500 feet. Fire control came via central transmission systems connected to Kommandogeriet 40 fire control computers or portable Würzburg radar sets. Batteries of 4 guns typically deployed in square formations for concentrated firepower. The guns were usually equipped with a sophisticated analog fire control system that could calculate shell flight time and target movement to direct all weapons at the same predicted impact point. By August 1944, there were 10,704 Flak 18, 36, and 37 guns in active service, now forming the backbone of Reich air defense alongside newer weapons. Luftwaffe studies indicated that at 29,500 feet altitude, the 88mm Model 18 and 36 had only 14 seconds to effectively engage a target, while the 105mm guns had 49 seconds and the 88mm Model 41, along with the 128mm guns each, had approximately 68 seconds of effective engagement time. One 88mm gun position near Salerno in Italy displayed 44 kill rings painted on its barrel, each representing a destroyed tank. An American tanker who survived losing 3 tanks wrote to Chrysler after VE Day that an 88 sure makes quick work of them, stating that the shells went through the armor just like it was a piece of paper. The gun's success led directly to development of tank-mounted variants, including the 8.8 cm KWK-36 for the Tiger I tank and the 8.8 cm KWK-43 for the Tiger II. Over 20,000 88mm Flak guns of all early variants were produced throughout the war. The 8.8 cm Flak 41 represented Rheinmetall's attempt to create an even more capable anti-aircraft weapon for engaging the high-flying bombers that were becoming increasingly problematic. As early as 1939, the Luftwaffe recognized that existing 88mm weapons could not effectively reach the altitudes at which Allied bombers were beginning to operate. Rheinmetall responded with an entirely new design featuring a longer barrel of 74 calibers and a more powerful cartridge with an 855mm case length. A prototype was ready in early 1941. The new gun fired a 9.4 kilogram shell at a muzzle velocity of 1,000 meters per second, giving it an effective ceiling of 11,300 meters and a maximum of approximately 14,700 meters. General der Flakartillerie Otto Wilhelm von Renz assessed this performance as almost equal to the 128mm guns. The weapon featured a lower silhouette on its turntable mounting than the older Flak 18 series on their pedestal mounts, making it easier to conceal in field positions. However, the Flak 41 proved mechanically complex and troublesome in service. In North African conditions, the guns were prone to jamming in the desert climate, forcing most to be withdrawn back to Germany where they could be properly maintained. The high cost resulting from the design's complexity kept production numbers limited. Only 279 had been built by February 1944, with just another 277 completed by the war's end. In January 1945, 318 Flak 41 guns were reported in active service. Despite its problems, post-war assessments regarded the Flak 41 as technically superior and one of the finest anti-aircraft guns Germany produced. Krupp had also submitted a competing design, the 8.8cm Gerayet 42, which was not accepted as an anti-aircraft gun but was further developed into the devastating 8.8cm Pak 43 anti-tank gun and the KWK 43 tank gun that armed the Tiger II and Jagd Panther. Continuing with super-heavy anti-aircraft artillery, the massive guns designed to reach the highest flying bombers. The 10.5cm Flak 38 and 39 provided German forces with anti-aircraft capability against bombers flying above the effective ceiling of 88mm weapons. Development began in 1933, when German military planners foresaw the need for heavier anti-aircraft guns to counter the high-altitude bombers that would inevitably be developed by potential enemies. Both Rheinmetall and Krupp submitted designs for competitive evaluation in 1935, with Rheinmetall winning the contract with their Gerayet 38 design. The resulting weapon entered production as the 10.5cm Flak 38, featuring an electrical control system and powered loading mechanism to handle the heavy shells. Weighing approximately 10,224 kilograms in firing position, this was a massive weapon requiring substantial prime movers and prepared positions. The gun had an effective ceiling of approximately 9,450 meters and a maximum ceiling of approximately 11,400 meters, substantially extending the defensive envelope against the high-flying American heavy bombers that began appearing over the Reich in 1943. The Flak 38 was soon supplemented by the Flak 39, which replaced the electrical gun laying system with a mechanical alternative offering improved reliability. Despite its capabilities, the 105mm series never achieved the fame of the smaller 88mm weapons. The gun proved too heavy for practical field use, while offering only marginally better performance than the 88, leading to its employment primarily in static positions defending critical installations. The Kriegsmarine adopted a naval variant designated the 10.5cm SKC-33 for shipboard use, installing these weapons on the Bismarck and Scharnhorst-class battleships, as well as Deutschland and Admiral Hipper-class cruisers. Approximately 2,105mm Flak guns were built between 1936 and 1945. Many were eventually mounted on railway carriages to provide mobile heavy air defense, and significant numbers defended the massive Flak towers constructed in Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna. The 12.8cm Flak 40 was the largest German anti-aircraft gun to see widespread deployment during the war and represented the ultimate expression of conventional anti-aircraft artillery. Development commenced in 1936 under the direction of Rheinmetall Borsig. Initially designated Gerayet 40 and intended as a mobile field weapon for the German army. Little priority was given to the project initially, as existing weapons seemed adequate. A pilot gun was tested in 1937, proving the design sound but revealing the weapon's weight made field mobility essentially impossible without major infrastructure support. The barrel had to be removed for transport, a process requiring several hours and specialized equipment that proved impractical under operational conditions. By 1938, alternative solutions were being considered, and the weapon was redirected toward the static air defense role that would define its service. The resulting Flak 40 entered production in 1942 and began reaching service units that same year. The gun rotated freely upon a fixed platform bolted into solid ground to counter the violent recoil forces generated by firing. The barrel measured over 7.8 meters long, and the complete weapon weighed approximately 17 tons in firing position. A crew of multiple specialists operated the weapon, managing a horizontal sliding breech with powered rammer and hydro-pneumatic recoil mechanism. Elevation ranged from -3 to +88 degrees with full 360-degree traverse. Muzzle velocity reached 880 meters per second, propelling a shell weighing nearly 28 kilograms to altitudes exceeding 14,000 meters. Some sources suggest maximum ceiling approached nearly 15,000 meters under ideal conditions. The Flak 40's sheer size and weight ultimately relegated it to static defensive positions along critical airspace routes throughout the Reich. Berlin and Vienna received the greatest concentrations of these massive weapons. Many installed atop specially constructed concrete towers designed to manage their weight while providing commanding fields of fire. A twin-barreled variant designated the Flak 40's Zwilling doubled the available firepower, with two side-by-side 128mm barrels, appropriate fire control systems, and dual loading facilities all fitted to a reinforced mount. These twins could fire up to 20 rounds per minute combined. Production of twin mounts began in 1942, with 10 sets completed that year, another 8 in 1943, and a total of 34 available by February 1945. Allied bomber crews dreaded these massive weapons whose heavy shells could destroy aircraft with near misses that would have been survivable against smaller calibers. The psychological impact of facing 128mm fire added to the weapon's defensive value beyond their actual kill rates. Next on the list is the massive Flak Tower program, the fortified positions that housed the heaviest anti-aircraft weapons. The Flak Towers were massive reinforced concrete structures constructed beginning in 1940 after RAF Bomber Command demonstrated the vulnerability of Berlin with retaliatory raids following German attacks on British cities. Hitler was infuriated and ordered construction of virtually indestructible anti-aircraft fortresses to protect Germany's most important cities. Each Flak Tower complex consisted of two structures. The larger G Tower, or Gefechtssturm, housed the heavy anti-aircraft weapons, while the smaller L Tower, or Leitturm, served as the command and fire control center, equipped with radar and optical ranging equipment. 8 complete Flak Tower complexes were constructed across 3 cities. Berlin received 3 complexes at Friedrichshain, Humboldt-Hain, and the Zoological Gardens. Hamburg received 2 complexes, while Vienna received 3. The towers represented extraordinary feats of wartime construction. First-generation G towers measured 70.5 by 70.5 meters at the base and rose 39 meters tall. Walls reached up to 3.5 meters thick, while roofs measured up to 3.8 meters of steel-reinforced concrete, all poured in continuous operations to eliminate vulnerable joints. Each tower could shelter between 10,000 and 15,000 civilians by design, though during the heaviest attacks on Berlin, an estimated 30,000 people crowded into a single tower. The structures included their own freshwater wells, independent power stations with underground fuel supplies, massive ammunition storage, food reserves, kitchens, cargo elevators, dormitories, and fully equipped hospitals with medical staff. Berlin's towers were constructed in only 6 months, and stood approximately 39 meters tall, with walls between 2 and 3.5 meters thick, depending on the tower and its generation. The sheer scale of these structures demonstrated the resources Germany was willing to commit to air defense despite pressing needs on every front. The primary armament consisted of 8 128mm Flak 40 guns arranged in 4 twin mounts at the tower corners, providing 360-degree coverage. The tower's combined armament could generate enormous volumes of fire, with the 8 heavy guns delivering approximately 80 rounds per minute, while the supplementary 20mm Flak Vierling mounts contributed the vast majority of the approximately 8,000 rounds per minute total, reaching targets nearly 11 kilometers distant and at altitudes approaching 15 kilometers. At one point during the heaviest raids, The concentrated fire from Berlin's towers created a critical barrier that forced Allied bombers to alter their approach routes, demonstrating the strategic impact these installations could achieve. Supplementary armament included multiple 37mm and 20mm guns for defense against low-flying aircraft attempting to attack beneath the heavy gun's minimum engagement envelope. The L towers housed sophisticated Würzburg-Ries radar systems capable of detecting and tracking enemy aircraft up to 70 kilometers away, feeding targeting data to the gunners through underground cable connections between the tower pairs. When Soviet ground forces approached Berlin in 1945, the towers performed as super fortresses, absorbing everything the attackers could deliver while using their 20mm guns against ground troops. Even Soviet 203mm howitzers could not inflict significant damage on the massive concrete structures. The Soviets eventually bypassed the towers and later negotiated their surrender when food, water, and ammunition were exhausted. The Flak towers were among the last German positions to capitulate. After the war, the towers proved virtually impossible to demolish. One G tower required 3 separate attempts over 5 months of preparation, using more than 80 tons of dynamite before it could be brought down. Several towers survive today, with some repurposed as climbing walls, viewpoints, aquariums, nightclubs, and secure data storage facilities. Let us move on to self-propelled anti-aircraft vehicles, the mobile platforms designed to protect armored formations from air attack. The 3.7-centimeter Flak of Fahrgestell Panzerkampfwagen 4, nicknamed Wirbelwagen, meaning moving van for its boxy shape, represented Germany's first serious attempt to provide armored divisions with mobile anti-aircraft protection. By 1943, the Luftwaffe's declining ability to contest Allied air superiority made ground-based anti-aircraft defense increasingly critical for mobile formations. The concept of mounting an anti-aircraft gun on a Panzer IV chassis was first proposed in early 1943. A prototype displayed to Hitler on December 7, 1943, used the 2-centimeter Flak 38, but this armament was deemed too weak against modern aircraft. Only a single prototype with the quad 20mm mount was built before the design was rejected in favor of the more powerful 37mm Flak 43. The Mobilwagen was constructed on Panzer IV chassis that had been damaged on the Eastern Front and returned to factories for repair. An open-top superstructure provided the gun mount, with armored walls that could be lowered for full 360-degree traverse, or half-closed for firing at airborne targets while providing some crew protection. The first 20 units featured walls of 2 spaced 12mm armored plates, later changed to single 25mm plates, when testing proved spaced armor at this thickness offered no additional protection. Though intended as a stopgap solution, 240 Mobilwagens were produced and served the anti-aircraft platoons of panzer divisions on the Western Front until succeeded by more capable designs. The Flak Panzer IV Wirbelwind, meaning whirlwind, was developed in early summer 1944 as a true flak panzer with a fast traversing turret that could engage targets without the setup time required by the Mobilwagen. Karl Wilhelm Krause of the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend conceived the design and presented it to SS Obersturmbannführer Max Wünsche, commanding officer of the 12th SS Panzer Regiment, who forwarded it for approval. Hitler personally authorized the design. The Panzer IV's turret was removed and replaced with an open-top 9-sided turret housing a 2-centimeter Flak 38 quadruple mount. The turret's distinctive shape earned it the nickname Keksdose, meaning biscuit tin, among crews. Production was carried out by Ostbauwerke in Sagan, Silesia, beginning in July 1944. Testing at Bad Quelungsborn on the Baltic coast proved successful, with approximately 3,000 rounds fired against air and ground targets without mechanical problems. The combination of armor protection and rapid fire from 4 guns made the Wirbelwind effective against both aircraft and lightly armored ground targets. Between 87 and 105 Wirbelwinds were converted from repaired Panzer IV chassis, though discrepancies between factory records and Wehrmacht service documentation mean the exact number may never be confirmed. The Flak Panzer IV Ostwind, meaning east wind, was developed in 1944 as a successor to the Wirbelwind when combat experience revealed that 20mm shells often failed to inflict sufficient damage to bring down increasingly robust Allied aircraft. The vehicle mounted a single 3.7cm Flak 43 in an open-topped hexagonal turret on the same Panzer IV chassis. While the Flak 43 had a lower rate of fire than the quad 20mm mount, each hit delivered substantially greater destructive effect. A closed-top design would have been preferable for crew protection, but the heavy smoke generated by the 37mm gun precluded this option. The Wehrmacht ordered 100 Ostwinds in August 1944, but only 44 vehicles were completed between December 1944 and March 1945. Both Wirbelwind and Ostwind equipped the Panzerflak-Züge that defended Germany's premier armoured formations during the final desperate months of the war. The 501st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion provides an example of how these vehicles were employed. After losing all its anti-aircraft weapons and equipment by November 1944, the battalion's surviving anti-aircraft platoon personnel were moved from Wilhelmsdorf to Schwabhausen in Thuringia for resupply and training on the new Flak Panzers. By late December, they relocated to Bruggen near Cologne for further training. While the battalion was engaged in the Ardennes offensive, its anti-aircraft platoon was still reforming and could not participate. The unit was first equipped with 4 Wirbelwinds, followed by 4 Ostwinds, demonstrating the transition between vehicle types as production continued. By February 1945, the standard Panzerflak-Zug organization included 4 Wirbelwinds and 4 Mobilwagens, though some units received 8 Wirbelwinds or 8 Mobilwagens depending on availability. The April 1945 reorganization called for 8 Ostwinds per platoon, though by that point, production could not meet requirements. Finally, let us examine the fire control systems and radar technology that made German anti-aircraft defenses effective against modern aircraft flying at speeds and altitudes that would have been impossible to engage with unaided human calculation. German anti-aircraft success depended not merely on the guns themselves, but on sophisticated fire control systems that calculated the complex ballistics required to hit fast-moving aircraft at extreme ranges. The problem of hitting a moving target in 3-dimensional space while accounting for shell flight time, wind drift, air density, and target maneuvers required computing power beyond human capability in real time. The Kommandogerät series of analog fire control computers received input data including target bearing, elevation, speed, and altitude, then calculated the proper aim point accounting for shell flight time and target movement. These mechanical computers used cams, gears, and differential analyzers to solve the complex trigonometric equations required for accurate fire. The Kommandogerät 40 became the standard system during the majority of the war, allowing extremely precise fire by cancelling out the offset between the aiming crew and the guns themselves, directing all weapons at the same calculated impact point. The system could even account for the spacing between multiple guns in a battery, ensuring all barrels aimed at the same predicted intercept point. Radar integration began early in the war with the Würzburg series of precision tracking systems. These sets could detect and track individual aircraft with sufficient accuracy to direct gunfire even when targets were invisible due to darkness, clouds, or smoke screens. The standard Würzburg radar could track targets at ranges up to 29 kilometers, while the larger Würzburg Ries variant extended this to approximately 70 kilometers, providing crucial early warning and precise targeting data. As the war progressed, German engineers introduced increasingly sophisticated electronic systems, though Allied countermeasures steadily degraded their effectiveness. On July 24, 1943, RAF Bomber Command first deployed chaff during Operation Gomorrah, the devastating raid on Hamburg. These metallic strips confused German radar by creating false returns that made accurate tracking extremely difficult. In October 1943, the United States Army Air Force introduced a gun-laying radar jammer codenamed Carpet 1. While these methods reduced losses, they were never totally effective, and the electronic warfare battle continued until the war's end. By 1944, the combination of worn-out gun barrels, Allied electronic countermeasures, and increasingly inexperienced crews replacing trained personnel had forced German flak to rely primarily on barrage fire, filling volumes of sky with exploding shells rather than precisely aimed shots. The early war figures of approximately 4,000 rounds per kill degraded to approximately 16,000 rounds per kill by 1944. Despite these degradations, German anti-aircraft defenses remained deadly throughout the war. By the middle of 1944, Flak was responsible for the majority of American bomber losses and the overwhelming proportion of bomber damage. Between 3,360 and 4,453 bombers returned with flak damage in each of the 6 months ending September 1944. An 8th Air Force assessment from November 1944 acknowledged that new tactics were required, but admitted that many old methods remained necessary despite their costs. General Henry Arnold, commanding general of the United States Army Air Forces, would later state plainly that America never conquered the German flak artillery. Luftwaffe Quartermaster General Hans-Georg von Seidel estimated that by 1944 it took on average 16,000 rounds of 88mm Flak 36 ammunition, 8,000 rounds of Flak 41 ammunition, 6,000 rounds of 105mm ammunition, or 3,000 rounds of 128mm ammunition, to shoot down a single American bomber. These figures reflected the degraded accuracy of late war conditions rather than the weapon's inherent capabilities. The Third Reich deployed anti-aircraft weapons with a scope and sophistication unmatched by any other nation during World War II. From the ubiquitous 20mm Flak 38 that defended everything from infantry convoys to Hitler's personal train, through the legendary 88mm guns that earned respect as both aircraft killers and tank destroyers, to the massive 128mm weapons that thundered from concrete towers across Germany's greatest cities. These weapons exacted a terrible toll on Allied air power. The Flakwaffe employed over 1 million men and women by war's end, manning more than 9,000 heavy guns, 30,000 light guns, and 15,000 heavy searchlights. They were responsible for at least half of all American aircraft shot down over Germany, forced bombers to fly at altitudes where accuracy became problematic, and allowed Germany to continue war production far longer than would otherwise have been possible. The human cost of this aerial battle was staggering on both sides. Flak killed and wounded tens of thousands of aircrew while damaging tens of thousands of bombers that required repair, reducing operational availability and straining Allied logistics. Yet the Allied bombing campaign continued relentlessly, and no amount of anti-aircraft fire could prevent the eventual destruction of German industry and infrastructure. The guns that had defended the Reich fell silent in May 1945, but their legacy continues to influence anti-aircraft artillery development to the present day. The word flak itself, derived from Flugabwehrkanone, entered the English language as a generic term for anti-aircraft fire, and later for any hostile criticism, a linguistic testament to the impact these weapons had on those who faced them. Haichisam.